Hello, hello. I'm so happy today to have Richard Cohen, the president and founder of Elevate Packaging. Richard, I kind of grew up in the cellulose world. And when I see somebody who's doing so much with cellulose and other stuff, I get very excited. So thank you so much for joining the show and for doing the work you do.
It's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
So I'm going to start with a funny question, maybe. What is a software guy doing in the sustainability industry? How did that happen?
Yeah, there's absolutely no connection there. Long story short, I'll try to make it short as possible. In '99, I took a sabbatical from my software and strategy position. And during that time, I was traveling around the world and went to some of the most beautiful places in the world, very remote places. And I found all these plastic bottles in gorgeous remote areas. I thought two things. One, geez, who would bring that up here and toss that if they got this far? And second of all, this stuff's never going away. And soon after I returned from my year-long sabbatical, I was looking at opportunities, and one of the things that I had conceived was this concept of elevate packaging. The mission of that business was to eliminate plastic waste and to re-enrich the planet, which is still what we do today ever since we started in 2000.
So what I also heard, and just correct me if I'm wrong, is the idea that you found somewhere where there were natural kind of papers being made from things like mulberry, water hyacinth, Manila hemp. I was wondering where that was and what was that
Yeah.
experience like.
Yeah. So while I was traveling, I spent a year circumnavigating the globe, and I visited, pretty much everywhere, all major continents, and I found some papers being made in Philippines that were from an abundant crop called abaca. It's actually the same kind of material that's used to make money, the very strong paper money. And I also came across invasive species of plants like mulberry, which I found in Thailand. And at that time, when I was starting this initiative, there weren't the types of resources, resins, films that we have today. And so, in making the world's most sustainable packaging and eliminating plastic, I started with these very natural materials in very remote parts of the world. And that's really how the business started, based on mulberry and hemp and abaca and water hyacinth, which is an invasive species of plant that suffocates lakes. But our first label we made the first compostable adhesive label in 2007, and that was based on this hemp paper.
Super interesting because just for the listeners, abaca is such an amazing fiber, and I'm so happy that you spoke about it because they're similar to banana. I'm told very similar kind of species.
Yes, same
And a
species.
lot of
Yeah.
I don't know, you obviously know this, but lots of the tea bags come from
Hmm.
this abaca fiber,
Hmm.
and I know that Alstrom created a huge
Hmm.
IP around that and has been
Hmm.
very, very instrumental in building that whole domain. And of course, today we also use plastics and tea bags, but it used to be all natural abaca fiber, and which is so brilliant that somebody came up with that idea of this beautiful fiber. The other one you mentioned is very interesting, and I grew up in India, and there used to be sun hemp, and sun hemp used to be this fiber which they would make ropes out of, and then
Mm.
cots out of. They would sleep in those cots, and I slowly saw them go away and being replaced by nylon and that kind of material, more petroleum based polymers. And the challenge I realized was that this was a very manual process. So typically they would they call it retting of the reeds. They
Hmm.
would put it in water and let it rot. And then they had to manually thrash it typically on a big stone to remove it from the central shaft. And then those fibers would come out, and they were beautiful fibers. So we actually did a significant amount of testing with them. And Rich, you'll probably believe it. I was going to say you may not believe this, but you will. Is that they were actually better than all softwoods of the world. So I could get a
Hmm.
black spruce, a white spruce, a northern pine, which are the best kind of softwoods, and they would be better. So I was
Yeah.
so, when I was reading about this experience of yours, I was so enthralled that, somebody else was looking at these fibers, which are kind of going away in many ways, and
Yes.
people are not investing in them enough. But I wanted to, zero in and plug in. And of course, if you have any comments on that, please do give those as well. But I wanted to zero in on this word you used. There's clearly a traveler in you, circumnavigating the world. And it clearly seems that you had a lot of growing up influences from outdoors. So I would love to hear from you about that side of you. What takes you to outdoors? What is that feeling that you get that drives you in the direction that you're going, considering that you're so nature connected as well?
Yeah, well, I'm a little older. I didn't grow up with technology like the kids have today. So I was used to, as a young kid, literally walking out my front door and playing outside and being creative in play. And one of the things I did quite often as a very, very young boy is I'd go down to a creek near my house and we would build forts out of stray pieces of wood and branches and I always enjoyed that. And I enjoy. I think there's two things. I enjoy nature because in nature I find truth and peace and humanity and like just like really feeling like grounded. And then also I'm a very dynamic problem solver. So I like being in an unstructured environment like in nature and building like a fort or building a bridge or a raft or whatever it is, and constructing it out of the resources that you have. So I think those two things together set the stage for me to build this company because uh, I really enjoy nature and I think nature must be preserved. And so when I look at the contributions I can make in my life, I want to do things that are contributing to a better world. And that's how I got involved in eliminating plastic. But at the same time, I'm also a problem solver. I'm an industrial engineer, software developer, strategist, and I like difficult, complex problems and making them graceful, simple, and easy, which is how we got into building this amazing circular compostable packaging solution. So I'll go on a bit more beyond your question, but our mission from the onset was to eliminate plastic and re-enrich the planet. So initially, the challenge was to create alternatives to plastic that were compostable. But soon we found out that these compostable items might not be getting composted because of access or contamination or what have you. And we partnered with Compost Stewardship Institute, which is a EPR takeback program that enables us and our customers to collect all of the compostable materials and actually get them in a compost contamination free. And to me, that's like the trifecta of what we've been trying to accomplish here because our goal isn't to be a packaging company. Oftentimes I call ourselves the anti-packaging packaging company because that's how I got into this. It was against packaging. But I know that it's a necessary evil and packaging serves a function. The real challenge is how do we make it and build a system in a way that doesn't have the negative environmental consequences.
No, I totally agree with you. The best packaging is probably no packaging. But I
That's
guess I guess we are so used to our conveniences that it's a necessary evil, as you called it. And I think it's so powerful what you're doing in terms of not just looking at selling packaging, but also looking at, how do you actually get it back and keep it in the either composted or keep it in the loop. But I want to get in more in detail of that. But before we do that, let's address what is Elevate packaging and what does it do and what drives you guys to kind of do more and more of what you're doing in terms of compostability. So talk to us about Elevate and what it means to you.
Yeah. So at the highest level, again, the mission it's based on a mission, which is to eliminate plastic waste and re-enrich the planet, and that's our guiding light. That's our north star. But the next level, I'd say, is what is Elevate packaging? The simple answer that most of the world can digest is it's a packaging company. It sells compostable packaging. But the really broader thing, what is Elevate? If you want to fully understand, it's not a packaging company. It really isn't. What it is a company that is on focused on that mission and trying to enable brands with solutions that protect their product during the life of their product and during the usage of their product and during the transit of their product, and also, help them to manage their product through the whole life cycle to the customer. And then at the end of the usefulness of their product, there's no negative consequence for the materials they use to package or protect it. And I really think in these very vague kind of concepts because it opens up the possibilities for all kinds of solutions. Like, of course, there's no force field that exists, or we can't teleport. You can't put a force field around products yet, and we can't teleport them in portions that you need. So, but if that existed, I think that'd be a better solution than packaging potentially. But um, yeah, so I look at it more from because I'm a software guy. We first develop requirements of the software, and then we develop the application. And I think about solving this the same way. So again, I think on the surface, everyone knows you can go to our website, you can buy this packaging, it ships out the same day. We have really fast turnaround and custom, so it's a packaging company by all looks. But we really have a much greater mission, which is how. So we don't categorically, I guess you'd say we're the packaging industry, but internally we see ourselves in the sustainability industry.
So I see you're totally right. Like you do so many of these different kind of packaging materials, more than materials, the bags and different structures and flat and
Mhm.
all the different kinds. How do you decide what is your parameter to decide what is that base material going to be? Like I see that you use a lot of cellulosic film.
Mhm.
And how did that come to be? And what is your yardstick to decide that okay, I'm going to use this because of XYZ? So how does that take
Mhm.
place?
Yeah, so in the very beginning of when I was looking at the business from a long-term perspective, my thought was, well, if I'm going to help brands eliminate plastic, what's the better alternative? And jokingly, you could think of the force field, you could think about teleporting stuff. These are great ways to eliminate these negative aspects. But those not being really viable options, you start looking at recycled plastic. You start looking at paper instead of, plastic. You look at reusables, and compostables, obviously, are another option, right? So, as I evaluated the options and looking at it from a full life cycle, a circular life cycle, I came to the conclusion in early 2000s, even though it was not so popular, that we should focus on compostables and just you know put our position down, or put our flag in the ground on that. And I'll never forget, like when I went to a trade show in 2008 to launch these compostable labels at a show called Label Expo. People had never even heard of the word compostable. I had companies coming up to me and they say, "So you have a combustible label?" I'm like, "I certainly hope not." But I laugh about that because there are different inflection points in the path where I realized what I believed, what I saw, what I was envisioning was extremely foreign. I mean, now today, the term compostable is pretty broadly understood, and the concept and the need for it. Um, but at the time, that's what we chose. Now the question is like, how do we know that something's compostable? Thank goodness there are international standards for that. So it's almost like the same question of how do you know that that food's organic? Or non-GMO. There are metric sticks for that. There are internationally recognized standards. The one we use is all of our materials must be certified compostable, or they must be compliant with ASTM D6400 or EN 13432 from Europe. And there are other standards too that we recognize, but those are the big ones. And as a starting point, there are two things that we care about when we're making a product. One is that the core materials are certified compostable. We won't move forward if there's an ingredient that's not certified compostable. The next is that there's a pathway for it to get composted. And I think that's what makes us unique because we don't see ourselves as a manufacturer of packaging. If you're a manufacturer of compostable packaging, you mostly care about that first aspect, that all the materials are compliant with compost standards. But if you're looking at it from a circular perspective, which is what makes Elevate very unique, we actually want to ensure that those are getting composted. So we clear a pathway to ensure that that item that we're going to produce and introduce to the world can and will be composted, and there's at least an exact place to compost that.
You've said so many things, and there's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to unpack three in sequence. So let's start with the first part that you mentioned in terms of performance. So of course, like as what is the dharma of packaging? It is fundamentally to protect what is inside. And
Mm.
I think as packaging people, we can never compromise on that, and that'll be a bigger damage if we were to if our
Mm-hmm.
packaging was to not ensure that basic function. So how do you ensure? Because of course, a petroleum polymer works very differently many times, and so how do you
Mm-hmm.
ensure that you're choosing materials that do not compromise on performance, because that might hurt the customer and your business as well. So how do you do that?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that's something we're really proud of. Is that everything that we put out there? The thing that I should say, the thing that really troubles me is when I hear people make a comment that, "Oh, that's sustainable" or "That's compostable." It must not be as good, and that's not true for us. So the other part that I didn't explain because I focused only on materials was the product development part. The product development part is another aspect of us bringing a product to market. What we tend to do, we look at two things. We look at what the conventional plastic item is performing, what its performance is. And we also look at the application of the customer. How is the customer using that? What is the performance that they require for their environment, their situation? Based on those two market requirements, we then design our solution, whether it be resins, films, adhesives, to be exactly compliant or better than the plastic alternative. So in our world, there's a lot of things, right? With adhesive labels as adhesion and set time and release off the release liner. There's a lot of technical things there. And in packaging, oftentimes two of the big things are barrier properties, oxygen and moisture barrier properties. And so we will, look at, for say, I'll take an example because it's easier to understand it that way, a coffee bag. You want to make sure your coffee is preserved and fresh and doesn't absorb moisture or an oxygen. So coffee bags conventionally, even plastic ones, have specific quantitative metrics for that. OTR for oxygen transmission rate and WVTR for water vapor transmission rate. We use those same metrics to design the compostable solutions. So there's zero compromise when you're buying a compostable piece of packaging. That's an example of the kind of technical requirements. And then, of course, the usage requirements, things like print quality. We don't compromise on those. Just because it's compostable, I was going to say, not only is it not compromised, but we believe we have amazing, outstanding print quality that's good or better than a lot of plastic products. So that's our engineering part. We spend most of our time on engineering the solutions, and then frankly, they sell. We don't really have a big sales team or marketing team, but they tend to sell themselves because we design them in a way that meets the market need.
You've given me much more to unpack, so I'm going to get there, but I'll stay with my first three, and then get into the technicalities a little more. So you're right. You were very early in the game of compostables, and this is you're talking early 2000s, and people didn't understand it. So why choose that path when you're also talking about making sure that everything comes back into the system? why not go quote unquote, and we know the reality is different, but just from your perspective, why don't go the recycling route? That's the quote unquote.
Ah,
And like, why don't we say that, oh, it has so much recycled content, or it is recyclable, and it's not multi-layered, it's a monomer. You can do a lot of things around there, and probably easier. And we haven't yet gotten to the cost side of it, probably less costly too. But why did you choose this more difficult path, and how was that kind of journey initially, at least?
certainly I took the more difficult path, but I focused on a solution that really solved the problem. And even the easier way could be to, like, some people have gone and focused on recycled plastics, but it also depends on how you define sustainability. So sustainability sometimes is, I think, defined primarily around environmental concerns, but I don't define it that way. I define it around both environmental and human concerns. So when I think about sustainable, I think about sustainable for humanity and sustainable for our planet. So when you look at plastic, you could say, look, it's not sustainable because it's doesn't get recycled, and we're just putting more plastic in the earth. So let's create a recycling mechanism. Let's get from 5 or 9% recycling of plastic to 30, 40%. Then we have a solution. But what they're missing there is that plastic never goes away. That's one thing, whether it's recycled or not. And the second aspect is there's a human element too. And that's that microplastics are progressively becoming more and better understood. And there's a lot of really good evidence that indicates that they cause human health problems, things like endocrine disruption. And there's a lot of things we can't explain right now, like male sperm counts are reducing dramatically. And why is that? There are microplastics everywhere in all our bodies. We don't really know what's happening. It's, to me, it's like one of those things. I think it will reveal itself with time as we get smarter, in the same way that smoking cigarettes revealed themselves over time. People, thought, they might not, in the 50s and 60s, they may or may not be good. They may cause some problems. And it wasn't until later in, I don't know, late 80s, 90s, where they started realizing, wait a minute, there's actually a strong correlation between cancer and cigarettes. And I believe that plastic is going to take that path. At some point, we're going to be able to understand that all this plastic that we've introduced to our planet isn't just a pollution problem for the earth, but rather we have a human health issue going on here now, too.
And I'm going to add one more to your thinking. You probably already think of this, but it's from petroleum. That's a limited
And
resource.
that's an,
And it
yes,
has
thank
its
you.
own challenges in terms of, how you extract and how you create the styrenes and the ethylenes and, the condensation of those gases. There's a whole big piece of where it comes from. And it's a limited resource. And, the damage that does is another idea that I'm sure you already have it, but still adding to your thought, very clear kind of thought process. The third part which I wanted to plug into from your earlier statement was in terms of, it's a huge ask when you say that you want to also ensure that it does get composted, especially say you're giving a mailer. And I want to dig into how you kind of go about this, because if you
Mhm.
give a mailer and you sell whatever 300 mailer bags, it'll be very difficult for somebody to track that did it go into a compost site, because ultimately it's going to reach some household. So I'm sure you're thinking about this. And then how do you do that? Because what you said was you always want to also think, where will it end up? And not everywhere has an industrial composting site. Obviously not everybody is going to do home composting. So how do you tackle that kind of dichotomy?
Yeah, it's that one has to do with a lot of legacy thinking and incumbent industries when it comes to packaging. people have it, the public, all the world has it pretty well entrenched in their mind that packaging is waste. It's just how we've known packaging in terms of, when you're done with it, it's waste. But that doesn't work in this new circular economy for two big reasons. One is that it actually it actually is a resource that could be decomposed potentially and put back in the earth, and doesn't proliferate landfills. And the other reason is because uh, when you're composting, that's not a waste process. That's a manufacturing process. So the concept of waste management, which is how we handle stuff like packaging historically, doesn't fit. And it's really difficult to unwind that thinking because it's so deeply entrenched. So now when you have a piece of packaging, people think of it as a piece of garbage, but it actually has a value. And the value is that it can be a resource for the input side of the compost pile. And there's a lot of pieces to that. One, the piece itself, a lot of the packaging we have is extremely high in carbon content. And composters need two things, they need nitrogen and carbon. And depending on where they are or their compost site, they are oftentimes hunting for carbon, like in New York City. They don't have a lot of carbon around them. There's not like a lot of felled trees and landscape waste. So they often buy wood chips from landscape facilities, like say in New Jersey, and haul them over to their site. This is where carbon-based packaging could be a resource in the process of composting. So because that, now we see packaging in a different way. It could actually serve a function. The other part is that um, composting requires that the inputs are pure, that they're not contaminated. And that's another fundamental difference between composting packaging and waste. Whereas waste, it's indiscriminate. You throw it in a hole, you're done. You bury it. But composting, if you give a composter 80% compostable materials and 20% plastic or stuff that can't be composted, they may not even be able to tell. Like it could be green bags that say save the earth, but they're plastic, but they're green and look compostable. But if you were to give that to a composter, they wouldn't know until they went through the very expensive process of composting it for 90 days and then looking at their pile and realizing that, one, now they see the plastic because it didn't decompose, and two, they have to figure out how to either cleanse or throw away the entire lot of their output. So it'd be like when it's very difficult for people to embrace this concept with packaging because it's really the same as if you're baking something or making some food. If you start with spoiled meat, you can go through the whole process of taking that spoiled meat and making the most delicious meal. But at the end of the meal, after all the effort of cooking it, preparing it, if it's spoiled, you throw the whole dish away. And that's, I think, a fundamental difference between waste management and resource management. And the waste management industry has been built upon this concept of giving people an open bin that doesn't really have, maybe they say, yeah, sort it yourself, good luck, try to figure out where the recyclables go, try to figure out where the landfill goes, and try to figure out where the compostables go. But that is a very difficult process that we know doesn't work well. And we know that because we spent 50 years, with this recycling industry, recycling with the waste industry running this recycling of recycled materials, and we're finding it's failed miserably. And the results we get after billions of dollars investment in that system is that you can't manage these resources like you manage waste.
But Rich, aren't we adding another layer of complexity in a way? So yes, you can sell a compostable product, but my question was coming also more from your insight that you're trying to make sure that there is a facility that composts it in the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I'm trying to dig into is that even possible? Like, can you really figure out that, if somebody posts a mailer bag to me that is using the Elevate solution, uh, do I have the wherewithal to understand, whether this goes into a compost at all? Or is that something that, you're seeing, with all your effort on the composting side
Mhm.
to eventually get there? How do you see that puzzle? You know,
Yeah, I
getting
can't.
getting you know getting to that stage of figuring it out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I certainly don't have a crystal ball, so I can't. I definitely don't know what the future is going to look like. Um, when I worked in strategy, my boss often would, he would say, it's all about standing on the shoulders of one development, one prototype, and then the next and the next. And as you stand on the shoulders of the first prototype, you get more visibility and more visibility progressively. And when I think about analogies, I think about transportation. Like the horse and carriage in 1900, the horse and carriage was the primary way to get around. And if you wanted to bring the most brilliant, successful, innovative people in the transportation industry, you'd have got the best people that have horses and carriages. If you put them in a room and said, "We got to get from A to B better and faster," I would put down any bet of money that not one's going to come up with the automobile. No one's going to come up with a combustible engine. And it takes an outsider often to see how to innovate and create a disruptive change. And we've seen that in many, many industries. Obviously, the internet's another one, or books. Borders Books and Barnes and Noble. They stuck to their guns on retail being the way to distribute and sell books. And then there was this little tiny company that thought it might be nice to sell books on a website. And they're like, no, no one's gonna want to do that. Want to page through a book, sit down in a store. And the little company is called Amazon.com now today. And I think that it's difficult for the incumbents in the packaging world, especially the most successful, and the waste industry and the hauling industry and the certification industry. They're not visionaries. They're the horse and carriage people. They can't. They're not. They have a lot of reasons why they. Number one, that's not what they do. They run successful businesses that are focused on that operational aspect. Number two, they're tied in to very expensive assets that they need to monetize. They can't just re-engineer their entire business model. It's very difficult. And like I said, they're just not the ones that are going to come up with that disruptive thinking. So when we talk about what the future of this is going to look like, it's really hard to see that because we are the Model T, and everyone with the horse and carriage is like, our horse can get through the mud way better. And by the way, when that Model T gets 30 miles out, it can't eat hay and keep going. And it's difficult to envision a world in 1910 where there are going to be gas stations on every corner. There's going to be super highways from California to New York. There are going to be rules of the road, on and on. The car is going to become an earth moving machine like Caterpillar, and it's going to become a race car like a Ferrari. It's difficult. I know, is you can't envision that. It's hard to envision that. So that's why I say I can't tell you what the crystal ball is. I believe what we've built is the Model T. And it's exciting because it's fundamentally different and it's not fitting into the horse and buggy industry. It's not a buggy and it's not a horse. So how we'll be judged and where we'll go, we'll see. But we've got a lot of people that like the idea of getting in the car and driving, and our market base is growing because it all comes down to meeting customers' needs. There are a group of customers out there that are progressively interested in not only providing a product to their customers that care about sustainability, that that product is sustainable, but the packaging is sustainable. And one of the things that for them, the benefit is they not only can say that their product is aligned with that customer's values, but they can also now say the packaging is aligned with their values as well. And when you first introduce compostable packaging, Some people say that's great, but what do I do with it? And now they have an answer to say, listen, we have a pathway. It's probably not the best. It's not the perfect. It's the Model T. You could drive 15 miles out, but you got to come back and get more gas. But guess what? Someday there could be it could be a better infrastructure. And I think that's how I see where we're at with this. Um, and we have a small group of very loyal and deeply sustainable clients that are part of our system. And like I said, I don't know if we'll have the winning card or not, but that's the model that I put out there. And part of the reason, frankly, is because when I look back at the existing legacy system with the way we handle waste, the way we make packaging, I don't think it's sustainable. I think we're on a crash course already with that thinking.
I couldn't agree more with you. And I love your idea of kind of one step at a time. And instead of trying to say that I'm going to solve everything in one day, and it kind of reminded me, I grew up climbing mountains in the Indian Himalayas. And it was always like, over 18,000 feet. If you look up, you're dead. You have to just do that
Yeah.
one step. Can I do one more step? And that's that one more step. And I think I
Right.
like that idea of one step. Just take that one step, and can I do one more step after that? And
Mhm.
that will hopefully get us to the peak. And if it doesn't, okay, you still had a good journey, and call it good. Okay, couple of other things as you were speaking. Going back to the base materials, every base material is still got entrapped energy, right? If you look at the cellulosic film, it's not easy. The yields are like 20% of, even if they're
Mhm.
using a sustainable forest or they're using agri fiber. The same thing with bagasse, the same thing with hemp. Ultimately there will be a pulping process, there will be a process to kind of make it into some kind of material, usable material. Do you look at that at all right now, or you just feel that at least it's better than the incumbent? And how does it work out for Elevate from the base material processing standpoint?
It's a good point. Yeah. I mean, honestly, when you start to look at, you really get in there in terms of, I want to create the most sustainable solution. And when you really philosophically dig into that, you're like, wait a minute. And you just get to the point where human existence is not sustainable. Like just us living in the world, we're consuming. And I think my young daughter once said to me, she said, Dad, the world would be better off without humans, right? Like we what do we contribute? We just take. And I had to think hard about that. It's like, but I think when it comes to this packaging, you're right. Like ideally, like, and I once said, I think back in some interview in like say 2004 or something like that, that my dream would be for us to go out of business. So I look at what we're doing, like the March of Dimes, and the March of Dimes was created to eradicate polio. It was to eliminate polio. Polio is a horrible scourge of the world. I think that's how I look at what we are, and so if they win, if their business is successful, they're out of business. They've got rid of polio. Right now? They've gone on and found other missions to pursue. But for me, that would be my ultimate dream, is to not have to do this anymore. Really, it really sincerely is. But I believe packaging is never going to go away, and that's why I call it a necessary evil until we have the force field or the teleporting, that kind of thing. So I do look at it exactly how you said, Ved. I look at doing less evil. How do we just do as less of a footprint as possible? Because I think that our existence and packaging, there always is going to be a footprint. There's always going to be something to poke at and criticize, but let's just keep trying to do better. And let's, if you look at my LinkedIn, I say I'm on a mission to eliminate 1 billion pounds of plastic annually, and by doing that, we're improving the planet. But at the same time, we are out there making product and consuming energy to make the compostable packaging. So, it's, yeah. I do. I look more at the elimination of plastic and the good we do there, as opposed to getting too overwhelmed with the consumption that is necessary and the production that's necessary. I mean, that both are necessary. You know, we definitely care about scope three emissions and all that, and we do consider that in everything we do. But there are going to be, you know, what's the term? You gotta break an egg to cook an omelet, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I definitely agree with you. And there's only that much you can tackle. And again, you do the best with what is available rather
Yeah.
than not doing anything. It's the circle of influence idea. At least you're not sitting in
Hmm.
the circle of concern and brewing. You're at least trying to do that one thing that might make a little difference at least, because you have to ultimately work with what is there. And your daughter is totally right, because there is no such thing as an eco-friendly industry. It's just a used
Hmm.
term, right? As soon as it is an industry, it will use something, it will use energy, it
Right.
will use water, it'll use resources, it will create some damage. But yeah, maybe we call an eco-friendly industry a lesser of the two evils, or we use it as branding. But it's not going to be earth friendly. And she's so right. If we all went away, the earth will just flourish, right? Everything else will just kind of boom,
Well, that,
animals and
that kind of happened during COVID too, right? I think they
exactly.
started showing how
Yeah.
everything started coming back to life.
Yeah, and it's so quick, right? So
Yeah.
it's amazing. The other one which you mentioned, and it's super fascinating, especially considering that you're a more customer-facing company, is your effort on product development. And I think again, from us as the people in the packaging domain, I think that's so important. So can you tell us a little more about that idea, that how do you invest towards more and more product development? And do you end up hiring engineers, or do you find people who you kind of collaborate with? Because it's a big thing, right? Especially when you're trying to solve a puzzle for a
Yeah.
customer, to really get it right. And there is so many substrates to pick up from. And like literally, you may not have even realized it, but you went into adhesives and ink just in passing. So those are all well thought of ideas. So you're clearly doing things in that domain. How do you go about that product development side?
Yeah, I think again, my background in software kind of drives a lot of the way I think about doing things. Um, so I first think about things in terms of requirements, and I look at the market base that we're serving, and I look at what they really want. And I argue that none of them want packaging. And I always say not a single person that buys from us buys packaging. No one buys packaging. What they're buying is sustainability. And the reason why, and I'll talk to a buyer, if I have a buyer that says, well, I can get a plastic bag for, 3 cents less, I would say, well, why don't you buy that? And then do you know what you're buying? And because I'll give you five more places that have it cheaper too, and it's plastic. And they said, no, no, well, we want yours. Yours is compostable. I'm like, that's what you're buying then. So when you first understand that the buyers, when they come to us, they're buying something sustainable, they're buying sustainability, you realize that they don't want the bag, they want sustainability. And because they want sustainability, they probably want it throughout their entire product and organization. Because it'd be quite silly for someone to buy a compostable label from me, but then put it on a plastic clamshell, right? So certainly I mean, that just wouldn't make any sense. So they're trying to pursue a mission of investing in sustainability, and it's across, and they probably don't want plastic. So because we understand our customer that way, we are trying to solve a customer problem. And in that way, what we want to do is provide them a basket of goods, because the other problem is sourcing, right? So they got the label, great. Now I need, a bag, or I need, stretch wrap, or I need a mailer, or I need. So what they can do with our company is come and get a turnkey solution. They can onboard. It's like really a seamless transition away from plastic. And that's exactly what we do. We have clients that from the back of the house to the front of the house, we do an audit, and we'll just go piece by piece. Okay, the stretch wrap on the warehouse, the inbound outbound side, we have a solution for that. The tape that goes on the carton, we have a solution for that that's compostable. Okay, let's keep going through. So now you're putting this in, you know, packs. We can give you bags for those packs, on and on, labels and shipping labels and mailers. And so what we found is most of the people that come to us, that customer segment, is really trying to solve a pervasive plastic challenge, not to buy a bag or a label. So we fundamentally, again, go to business quite differently because we're looking at solving that problem. The second part of that problem is they really want to be composted. So that's where the Compost Stewardship Institute comes from, because now we have a pathway. We say, great, please compost this in your backyard. But if you don't have a backyard, compost it in your municipality. If you don't have a bin, or you have a bin, but they won't accept packaging, bring it back to the store. Again, that's the last alternative because there's a lot of effort to go back to your coffee shop and say, here's the bag I bought. I'm bringing it back, and I'm buying my next bag of coffee. And then they have to collect it. And then they call Compost Stewardship to pick it up and get it composted. But, you know, that's a pathway. That's at least a pathway. But that's where I come back to. So what we try to do is provide a basket of goods that ranges the whole product line of what they might need. Everything from, again, we got all kinds of stuff, gloves and tape and labels and bags, and make it easy for them to onboard and eliminate plastic from their business, and then also get it composted. So that's again my I use this
Yeah.
other term, another software term, the UX.
Aha.
One of my favorite
Yeah.
UXs is stupid simple. It's Google. You go to google.com, like who cannot figure out what to do there? There's a blank page with one line,
Yep.
So that's the type of UX I want to create for packaging. I want to make it really simple. Back to what we were saying, it works just like your other plastic. It looks just like your plastic. And guess what? You can get it composted.
So what happens when you hit a wall? So when you were giving me the example, label check, bag check, box check. Now I need a shrink wrap. I don't have that. So what happens? Say like again, I'll give you an example that is closer to one of the challenges that we are tackling. We also produce a lot of molded fiber, for example, and it's a huge challenge when somebody says package it in plastic, because that's like you've defeated the whole purpose. You're saying that you're creating a compostable solution, and then you shrink wrap it in a plastic. And I'm like, and every literally when we go to the departmental stores, every molded fiber kind of stacks of plate, whether, I won't name brands, but whichever brand it is, it's all kind of shrink wrapped in plastic. And I'm like,
Mm.
that's again a challenge, right? You're trying to say that even you cannot find the solution. So we were trying to, for example, do it in PLA, but we had huge complaints because the customers, it would kind of the layer was thin. It would kind of disintegrate over time, and the customer would have a challenge. If you're shipping across the world, that would be a challenge. So if we were to come to you and we say that, Rich, find us a solution, we need a not a stretch film, we actually need a skin wrap, because we don't want to increase our carton size. So how would you go about that? You've hit a wall where
Mm-hmm.
you may not have a solution. So then how does the elevate product development cycle work then?
Oh, that's our favorite part, actually. I really love problem solving. So uh, I'm trying to think of the best. There's a lot of thoughts of how to address that, but um, we when a customer comes to us with a challenge, we try to understand a few things. We try to understand if it's unique to them or if there's a broader market opportunity. That's the business side of things. If we believe there's a broader market opportunity, and this happens quite often, we will understand the requirements and then we'll build it. And we just had a customer come to us. I tend to focus on really difficult or unique things, right? We have the only labels, we have the only coffee bags, you know, we have the only cannabis bags, we have on and on these solutions, right? Stretch wrap, tape, a lot of things like that. Someone came to us asking for a trash can liner, And I'm like, there's a million trash can liners out there, but they're not again, it comes down to they're not performing. They break, they get wet. So we've taken on that challenge to develop, and we have. It's finishing up its R&D process, but they came to us and said, it's not like we need a trash can liner. We need a trash can liner that works and doesn't break, holds heavy weight of waste. So then the next question is, how do we develop that? So one part is like, is it worth it? And we said it's absolutely worth it. And then the next part is, how do we go through the development? We, by design, we have a virtual manufacturing network, and that's intentional by design. It's a light asset, vertically integrated supply chain. And so we have a range of partners that have all different kinds of converting equipment. And then we also have, as I call, the Lego blocks. We have all these different pieces that we can snap together, like Legos. You can assemble them in different ways. So we have adhesives, we have films, we have resins, we have many, many components, right? And we can mix and match them in different ways to create things. So, as an example, we've just developed the world's first compostable, flexible film that can handle sauces and wet products. And we're working with one of the large chains of food companies here in the United States to provide them packets for their condiments. And but those are the kinds of challenges that we enjoy, because the way and some of it is partly of not being an incumbent, being the outsider. We think of very novel ways of mixing and matching those things, and even the converters we work with to build these components say, you can't do that, or that's not the way it should be done, and we're like, well, we'd like to try this out, we'll pay you the bill, and then we wind up developing a solution. So I'd say, as of today, one of our hallmarks, and this has to do with when I got involved, there were no materials out there. So we built the entire supply chain. So we build our own solutions. We build our own laminated structures. And because of that, and because we've been doing it for, decades, we've gone through the trials and tribulations of refining it and building really high quality solutions. So today, I believe we have the best range of flexible packaging solutions and labels that are available out there because of that. But to answer your question, we have the flexibility to do all that R&D based on the design of our business model, because we don't have our own coating facility. We don't have our own laminating facility, because it would be too expensive to have all these different things, right? Because we're focused on delivering a wide range of solutions. So what we have instead is a bunch of partners that we've developed over 25 years that are game to do experimentation with us. And we also know all the raw materials that are out there and have the relationships with the raw material supplier. And then it's usually a very collaborative experience. Like, I'm not a technical expert on those materials, but we will engage them and say, listen, we're trying to solve this problem. What do we blend in terms of resins, or how do we combine the laminates to create this solution? And it all comes back to, all these technical specifications that you're trying to drive to. And that's really how we've done it. And we're not embarrassed. We're not shy to invest, because we know 100% of our customers are compostable. So we know there's a market. If we could develop it, that's the other advantage we have. If we could do the R&D and develop it, we could bring it out to market, and our customers they'll eat it up. So I think it's like all these things combined enable us to do a lot of leading edge innovation, because we have the market, we have we have a lot of machines and partners to work with, and a lot of materials, and I think that's probably the summary of that answer. Yeah,
No,
I
and
think, and that's
that's
because we're so different than most other packaging companies and all that.
yeah, yeah. No, and that's great, because I think in a way what I hear is that being asset light also enables you a lot. Like you can
Very
pick,
much.
you can choose the right kind of partner for the right solution. So you've addressed something which is huge, like, again, and you do it so casually and lightly that I have to kind of come back to you and say, Rich, did you even realize what you just said? Like, you talked about flexible packaging, and that's a huge one. That's like the elephant in the room, right? Everybody's trying to find the solution, mainly because, we can ban all the plastics in the world. And you'll typically go to a natural grocers and say that, oh, they're not going to give you a bag. But when you look inside your own or the paper bag that they give you, you'll find all flexible packaging, which is multi-layered substrates, won't even kind of downcycle or anything. That's the only thing would be either lie in the landfill or be combusted. So so that's a huge challenge. And of course, earlier on you kind of mentioned two very important terms, which is the oxygen transmission rate and water or moisture vapor transmission rate. So these are really, really important kind of parameters, and I've found that it's very challenging, especially with the moisture barrier, to get it right. And I've seen companies
Hmm.
struggle with it. And even if they get it right, there is a cost that happens during the conversion process, because the Novolexes of the world and the Pactives of the world are running their speed, that's their machines at a certain speed. There is a certain there's certain packs per minute that are needed, and the new structure also has to adhere to that part. So I'm kind of breaking it down into two, three sections, and I'd love to hear your views on it. Number one is getting the structure right, and you actually mentioned a very difficult one, a sauce kind of sachet. That's a tough one. It's not easy, and it has to retain the freshness for a long, long time, maybe 6 months or something. And then that's the first part. How do you create a structure which is so wonderful, because all natural materials actually breathe, and that's the tough one, right? You have to they typically, even the petroleum structures, they have like four layers.
Hmm.
There's at least polyethylene, and then a metallization layer and a heat sealing layer. So that's the minimum that they would have. So how do you manage to replicate it in that structure? How do you manage to get it converted by the converters? And that adds on to my third part. How do you meet the cost? Because again, nobody wants to be double the
Hmm.
cost. They can take 20%, 30%, maybe 40%. But how do you address these three ideas in the flexible packaging domain?
Yeah, for me, it's similar to what I was saying before. We define the problem, and then we look to these experts. Again, I don't have that material science background, but they certainly do. And I think, like I said, the thing that liberates us is we're not beholden to norms or this can be done or can't be done. And I think when it comes to compostable materials, it's like the Wild West. There's not that many people that have a lot of experience with these or how to blend them or how to combine them. And because they have a certain like incumbent knowledge that they've had for years or taught how things should be done, they not may not be as uh, you know as frivolous or whatever in trying different experiments, because they don't believe they'll work. So I think a lot of the stuff that we develop is kind of by accident, like the telephone and the light bulb and electricity. And I think about these guys, Benjamin Franklin with his kite and his key and all that, you know, they discover these things kind of by accident, or, the phone, like and the light bulb. So, or electricity, I think that's, again, it comes back to what we were talking about before, where you stand on the shoulders of the next thing. You just try something out, and that's how we got to these wet sauce flexible films. We were really driving to create a higher barrier solution that was better than anything. It was for a different client, and this client says, "I really need." We already gave them very high barrier solution that's outstanding for supplements and coffee and powders, and they wanted to take it to the next level. And they were a big established client, so we went there. What we didn't realize, like the key or the light bulb, is that we wound up developing not only a solution that worked for their barrier properties, but by accident, another company, this bigger fast food company, found our materials, tried them out, and they said Eureka. And then they came to us and they told us, by the way, do you know your stuff? Is like we tried everything out there, but this solution, it works, and we're pretty elated. So that's I wish I could take credit for engineering that intentionally, but it was unexpectedly developed, and you're right, it's a hard solution, but and that I think it just comes out of this idea of experimenting, trying. We have the liberty to spend the money to do that because we're focused only on compostable. We know if we could break through, we have a market. So I think that's how that evolved, that particular solution. But trying to think of we have other situations too where, like, gloves. I didn't want to get into gloves, but we had a customer that says, "Listen, the gloves that are out there, they break. They're not strong, and you put them on your hand, they split." And so we started poking around and looking at how to make a better disposable food service glove. And we have a video, I think, on one of my LinkedIn or something like that, where we're like stretching it. The thing is stretches. It's got amazing strength. So we weren't going to do it other than the fact that we knew the market, although there were gloves out there, they wanted a better glove. So, and I like doing that kind of stuff. I really enjoy the problem solving part.
And that connects
Hopefully that
well to,
answers your question.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, no, it does, it addresses it. So, and that takes us well to the customer slash market side. Again, like what you mentioned before, is that the customer base that you have is automatically connected to compostability. So in a way, when you get in a new product, it's easier because
Hmm.
the customers are already keen on that solution. They don't need to be convinced about
Right.
compostability anymore, and it's always easier to sell multiple products to the same customer rather than finding new customers all the time. The one challenge that I see when we go to customers is, especially the customers at scale. I'm talking about the Unilevers of the world, the Marses of the world, who need like 20,000 tons of a single material a year. Um, I find that their process to shift is extremely slow because there is a lot
Hmm.
of trials that they have to do, tick a lot of boxes. Also, they need to make sure that you can provide the material at scale that they need. Um, then there are more mid-sized customers, a little bit
Hmm.
easier. And of course, the easiest ones are owner-driven, entrepreneur-driven, who are themselves passionate about it. So again, breaking it down into two parts. One is that, the customer type that would be ideal for you. When you probably have a kind of insight into that with 25 years of
Hmm.
work. And then how do they look at the cost side of it? Because that's the other challenge, right? Like, as much as we want, petroleum is and petroleum based products are a waste stream, and they already have a 80-year run. So there is a certain method to the madness that has been created, and they are able to do it at scale and at a very low cost. And a lot of these compostables are still kind of evolving. So there is going to be that time lag. And yeah, so the customer type and the convincing on the cost, how does that happen for you?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Yeah, sometimes I think about things in metaphors, and it just helps me understand things better. So when I think about that, I think about micro beers, like specialty beer, and you know, beer before they existed was like Budweiser and Miller, and those big, and they're 50 cents a can of beer, a dollar a beer. Now comes along this scrappy little industry that's making specialty beer, and there's not that many customers for it, and it's expensive. If you get a micro beer, it's $4, $5, $6, one can. That's it. And so it's very much a specialized product. So there's a function of a few things. I think one is, does the market appreciate the added value? And if they don't, it'll never grow. If they do, they'll see the value and they'll pay it. And the other part is a function of scale and growth and affordability too. So, and competition. So, when you look at the micro beer industry, it started out in the garages of people making their own beer, but eventually grew to the point where there was a broad demand for it, and people liked it. And what happened was the big breweries like Budweiser, for example, they don't know how to make that. That's a very specialized process. It's actually a very different process and a different market. They don't even know how to sell a $5 can of beer when they're selling 50-cent cans of beer, right? So, but at the same time, they're going to see their market eroding because more and more people are buying this and liking it. So what they have two options. They either somehow figure out how to create that product, otherwise they'll be out of business, or they buy them, or they absorb that. And that's a lot of what they did, right? A lot of these microbreweries got bought up, and the microbreweries got bigger. So I think, when I think about it that way, micro beer is still not cheap, but that means that the market sees the value and they don't mind paying a little bit more. And then when it comes to scaling, it's scaled up somewhat organically based on, demand. And I see compostable packaging that way. I think we're added value. Like Starbucks, I always joke, like, if I would have went to my parents back in like 1980 and said, I've got a brilliant idea. You've been going to the diner buying a coffee for 50 cents, bottomless. You could drink it all day, bottomless coffee for 50 cents. I'm going to sell one cup of coffee for $5. They would have said that's the stupidest idea ever. But look at that. We're doing that all day now, and Starbucks is pretty big. So I think compostable packaging is going to be like that, where people are, especially the younger generation, who's who's internalized sustainability, internalized climate change, living through and growing up with this. They feel that they have not just a responsibility, but it's a necessity for them to live in a sustainable world. And that's our client base. They willingly and happily are buying the equivalent of a micro beer because they value that it's not Budweiser and not rot gut, And so that then when you look at demographics, like global demographics, the market of people that have affinity for sustainability continues to grow every day a child is born. And the other market that might not value that continues to diminish every day as people get older. So I believe, as I say, we're on the right train. We're on the train. It might be a slow train, but we're on a train to where, what we're producing, the solution we're offering, it's fundamentally different than the historic product, but it aligns with the values of the customers.
And how do you go about finding that customer archetype?
That's the funniest thing, because we, I used to work at Granger. And I was just talking to one of my old executive colleagues just the other day. I said, you know what? I took something from the Granger playbook, and it says, the right stuff right here, right now. And if anyone knows Granger from the 90s, that was their slogan, the right stuff right here, right now. And what that meant was the winning formula for a distributor is to make sure you have what people need, you have it available, and you can get it to them right away. So when you say, how do we find our customers? We make it easy for them to get what they need when they need it in the volume that they want. That's supply chain management. And we've focused always on supply chain management as our secret sales force. And we do have, I wouldn't even call them a sales team. We have a team of people that help facilitate people to learn about compostable packaging, understand the pros and cons, figure out how to take the requirements and find them a solution. It's really consultative selling, I guess you'd call it, but I'd almost say they're more like internal consultants helping people understand what we offer. And how they come to us, I think it's just having a reputation of providing a quality product that works and having it available. We don't do a lot of marketing. We don't do a lot of sales. And that's what, now that being said, as we grow, we do want to engage more people, create more awareness. And that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm way more active on LinkedIn. And in the coming year, we're planning on doing a lot more of sales and marketing activities. but our sales has been the product, frankly. The availability and the ease and the functionality of it.
And I know it's complex. It's not as simple as you make it sound, right? The supply chain,
No, it
especially.
is.
I'm a recent immigrant to US, so I
Thank you
see
for
that,
appreciating that.
yeah,
Thank you for
no,
appreciating.
my gosh,
I'll
to
tell you.
get,
I just want to share one
yeah,
analogy. So the
please.
way I look at it, I say, guys, we're like a duck, and above the water, the duck's just gliding around so gracefully, but underneath, it's paddling so ferociously. And so that's what we want. We want the customers to see, like, wow, that's so easy. Look, they make it so easy. But the complexity, as you know, and you can appreciate, to not only source these materials and get them to cooperate and get them to be compostable and get them to perform and make it, all that is very complex. It is. And it's interesting because we see some competitors try to come into the market. They'll last for a year or two and then they're like they leave because it's not easy to do. It really is not easy. But we try to make it super simple, like the UX for Google. Just easy peasy. Yeah, that's our objective. Honestly, that's our business model. Thank you for
Yeah, and I
noticing
agree
that.
with you. If you're the key is to be available when and where the customer needs you. And but yeah, again, just reiterating, the US structures are so complex, and there's so many layers, the Ciscos and
Hmm.
the Butters and the brokers, and like the whole
Oh
whole
yeah,
drama,
yeah.
and the meat that gets added in each of that is again a challenge for the customer. But then if you're not there, then like, how does the customer find you? So I'm sure there's a lot of method to the madness that you've brought over time to be able to be available for the customer. I wanted to dig into one more area because you have a wide set of products, and when you look at the entire range of products, is it pretty even, or is it lopsided towards, say, mailer bags or something? So what are
Mm.
your larger lines of products that are selling, and what are you focusing more and more on for the future?
A good question. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of how, like, there's a few forces that drive us to our product development roadmap. Um, One is I think organically, what can we do easily? There I started out with adhesive labels. That was not easy, but that was something that was I'd say I got to that because of market opportunity. At that point in 2007 when I was working on that, I thought, well, I want to now move from the hemp and water hyacinth and abaca paper products to something uh, more sophisticated. And I could have got into paper trays or molded fiber and all. Like, no, there's a lot of that. So I was trying to figure out what might be needed. And at that point, I realized there were a lot of clamshells and things like that out there. But I'm like, people put stickers on those things. And I've got paper. I've got a really good paper here. I need to figure out how to make a label. And that's kind of how that evolved. So I guess that perspective, it was an unmet market need. But truthfully, it wasn't an unmet market need. There was no market need. People didn't, even still to this day, people will buy compostable clamshells and they'll put a conventional sticker on them. And two things. One, they often don't know they're contaminating the compostable item. And the second thing is, unfortunately, it flies under labels have flown under the radar of legislation, even in places like California, where you think they know about this. They will permit a non-compostable label on a compostable piece of packaging, and it's unfortunate because we have this beautiful solution. For imagine bananas and avocados you eat, you don't have to peel off the stickers anymore. You can put the whole thing in the compost. But that's the frustration for me because it's a product we've had since 2007, and yet and I designed it because I thought, this is an under radar piece of packaging. But at the same time, when it comes to legislation and brand owners, it's under their radar too often. So that's how that came about. The other products that we develop, I believe it's also driven by customer needs. We'll have a major customer come to us. Like I said, this is our need. Can you help us design that? Um, Sometimes it's creative thought. We have a really cool solution that I absolutely love. And it's because our business, we're wired to get rid of plastic. So any little bit of plastic that I know we can produce, I will jump on it. I don't even think about the economics. So on the top of like a bottle, there's that little plastic seal, that the heat shrink seal. I said, let's create those. Let's make those. So we offered them. I said, it's not, they're not gonna sell. They're like, a couple pennies each. What's that gonna not do anything for our business? But believe it or not, we launched it and people love it. And furthermore, I didn't think it would work because we don't sell bottles. So we don't even have the customer base with the complementary solution, right? It'd be one thing if we had bottles, but that's a solution we developed that was really just more of like, we hate plastic. We need to offer this to the world. And, I think that's how we're wired. We're always thinking about what other things can we make. And so we've got like cannabis packaging is on our radar. When I say that on radar, we're literally going to be launching it in the coming weeks. We've been developing it for years. It's a really difficult challenge to develop that because it has to be child resistant, and there's a lot of pieces to that to overcome. Trying to think what else we're working on some other things that aren't so complicated like poly bags, but there aren't a lot of poly bag supply, stock supply. So we think we'll be able to offer that easily to people in small quantities, like at a farmer's market. You know, so yeah, when it comes to flexible films, we're always looking for solutions. If you have any ideas, I'm open to them. And the other thing I will say, that is, we'll go to our material suppliers that are making these compost materials, and we'll ask them, when you made that resin, when you made that film, what are the applications you're thinking of? We'll help bring that to market. So that's another way we develop
Yeah.
solutions.
But if you look at your overall, and I have lots of ideas on flexible, so we can also take that conversation
Yeah,
after
and
the
I'm
recording
looking.
as
I
well.
want to talk to you about the Himalayas too, because I've been out there a
Yeah,
bit. At
absolutely.
the
Uh, but when you look at your total revenue, what's the biggest piece? What gets you
oh
keeps the stove kind of running, and what's the biggest part
yeah,
of
well, we
of the product?
really interestingly, we've got a pretty well balanced portfolio, and that's so. But to break it down, we've got the pieces that we have. We've got basically multi-layer laminated solutions. We have single layer solutions, and then we have adhesive labels, and then we also have some other things like gloves and tape and things like that. Those are not a heavyweight for us. Those accessories, but then there's one more dimension, because every that's all we offer, all of that in stock, but we also offer it all custom, complete custom size, custom printed. Um, the majority of our business is on the custom side. So the majority of our business are people coming wanting a custom printed pouch or custom printed labels, and that for sure that's the bigger part of the business. And across those lines, um, they're pretty well balanced, but there's a little bit heavier emphasis on the flexible packaging because it's a higher price point. So, a pouch, a stand up pouch, or a cannabis packaging is going to just cost more than a label or a cellophane bag. A cellophane bag is going to be, you know, 10, 20 cents each, and a cannabis bag is going to be 80 cents. So you send, yeah. So I think but in terms of volume, we have, yeah, it's pretty well balanced. It's just that the dollars, I think, probably more on the more complex, sophisticated structures. Yeah.
And it probably is more fun for you, right? That's a difficult nut to crack.
And you know what? The funny thing is, I like them all, because even like some of the fun stuff is the low cost stuff that you think isn't going to make you any money. But what we've done, like cellophane, is the one that I just love. It's a great product. I think we're the U.S. leader. I really do believe we're the U.S. leader for a few reasons, because we re-engineered the supply chain. So a lot of people that are doing cellophane, they're it's a very sensitive product to the environment. It doesn't like moisture. It doesn't like different. Yeah, you've worked with it. It's very temperamental, and so a lot of people aren't willing to stock it and have it on the ready because you don't want it in storage very long. But what we've done is we've engineered a supply chain that's very, very responsive, and we have our cellophane's available within 1 to 2 days. So we have it available. We can slit it. We can digitally print it in short runs. I mean, that's really uncommon for that, especially compostable cellophane. So you could quite easily get 5,000 full color photographic quality printed cellophane bags within 4 weeks from us. And that's the kind of that, and it's an older industry, as you know. Cellophane's like very, very old industry. So there's not a lot of R&D and innovation and development. So the equipment that we're using is quite old. It's from like the 1940s or whatever, really, really old stuff. But the but the process and the supply chain management is very progressive in how we manage all that. So that's the fun stuff for me. That it's
Yeah,
like not
I can
just product
imagine.
development, but it's like the supply chain development too.
True. On the other side, you kind of looking at both sides, the distribution system and the supply system. And we had Munir, I remember, had a fascinating conversation. He's part of Kodak,
Munir,
Eastman. Yeah. So Munir was
yeah,
on the
he's
show,
a good friend of
I'm
mine.
glad you
Yeah.
know him. Yeah, great guy. So again, got to learn a lot from him, and of course, I've worked for years with Futamura and that whole ecosystem as well. So know those guys well. In fact, our guy who was heading our flexibles in India was ex Futamura. So again, had a lot of conversations around cellulosic films. So a little bit of understanding, I would say there. Okay, let's take the conversation arc towards closure, looking at the time. But I want to talk more from your. I think it's more you than Elevate. But I'd love to hear from you because you're clearly spending time with, say, things like the Compost Stewardship Institute, and the other one which you mentioned was the Corporate Compost Leadership Council. So these are clearly coming from a place very kind of, I would say, rooted in your heart, maybe, that I want to do something to make sure that I'm doing right by the mission that I've undertaken. So I would love for you to address that, and also address it from a standpoint of, because most of the listeners are from the industry and or younger students coming into the industry. So let's hear from you on what drives you to spend time. Ultimately, that's your biggest resource, right, towards
Mhm.
these objectives. And how would you like to see others contribute more towards these objectives so that we can build a more robust community?
Yeah, thanks for framing it that way because I'd love to speak to the industry too. Like that's how I started this whole adventure. Interestingly, I stumbled into what I'm doing in some ways because when I developed the pressure sensitive adhesive solution for labels in 2007, my intention was entirely to supply that roll stock to the industry. In 2008, we launched Pure Labels at Label Expo in Chicago, and to a horrible reception. Like I said, they called it combustible. Some people say, "Can I smoke this?" It's a hemp label. Like they really had no idea what it was. It was expensive, who they'd sell it to, no idea at all. And so I was stuck. I created a lot of product, a truckload of this stuff, and I was stuck with a product that nobody wanted to convert or distribute. And so that pushed me into a corner to do this all myself. And that's really the truth of how I got to manufacturing it all and then also finding the market. And it took a while. It took a few years. It took a few years. But once we got going, we still couldn't find converters that would sign up. I think those days have changed. I know they've changed. We now have a world class range of flexible laminated solutions. World class. And I know that because people try all the other solutions. They say yours are the best. Our customers do the same. They'll shop around, they'll try different materials. We also have a world class range of roll stock that's PSA adhesive facing roll stock. Everything from every type of label, white labels, uh, clear, direct thermal, on and on. Um, we are now, for a long time, because we didn't know if people knew what to do with them, or we didn't want to go through the effort of trying to convince a converter what to do with it. We just kept it to ourselves. Progressively, we're selling that more and more. And it sounds kind of strange because we're giving away our secret sauce in some ways, right? These are magical materials that we've dealt out. But at the same time, we can't serve the entire market. There are all types of converters. They're serving customers we can never get to, industries we're not even serving. So we would love, and we've been building more and more distribution. Our end game is not to own that. I acknowledge that at some point that supply chain is going to become more mature. There's going to be more options, just like there is for all kinds of plastic films and plastic laminates. And so what we're doing is we're trying to support the industry by giving them literally turnkey solutions. And what's even crazier, we give them our customers. We have relationships with, because we don't do that, right? So we have relationship with converters like label printers where we're literally giving them the label material and then we're giving them the customers that will buy it because we don't have that equipment. So we have this amazing cooperative, collaborative, like ecosystem, relationship. They need us because we give them material and customers, and we need them because we need a converter. And that's really honestly the backbone of what has made us successful. The difference now is we are providing that material openly to the entire industry. And as someone says, like there's two sayings that come to mind: all boats rise. As the waters go up, all boats rise. So we know the market's growing. It's a huge market. We should all like cooperate. And the other with that is I took this from some friends of mine in the industry, but I say it quite often. Sustainability is a team sport. And I think that's so critical, especially for the industry to understand, because historically, a lot of times you can work in your vacuum. You just make packaging, or over here you're just doing resins, or here you're just doing films, or whatever it might be. But the way we solve this problem, and we're adding on also end of life now too. Now you got to also figure out, where it gets hauled to, how it gets composted. The way to create these circular solutions is entirely through team effort, and there's a lot of collaboration. So in summary, I'd say we are absolutely supportive of all types of converters that are looking to get engaged in sustainability, deliver solutions, and provide them all the support they need to get there.
And that is the aim for both these kind of, I would term them as community efforts that you're doing, whether it's the Compost Stewardship
Mm-hmm.
Council or the other one. Is that the aim? Because I think it was you who started the Compost
Well,
Compost Stewardship Institute as well, right? So I
yeah,
know you
yeah.
were one of the initial people to get into the corporate compost leadership council. So is the aim to build a stronger community? And as you said, it's a team sport. Is that what you're looking at there?
You know what? I'd like, I'm a problem solver. So it really comes, the genesis is really from the idea that we're creating a solution that encompasses a broader scope. Initially, like in packaging, the scope is packaging. So you're here. But when you do circular, the solution set, it has a broader scope. So early on, we were going to like the United States Compost Council, and we were like one of the only, if not the only, packaging company there. And it's like, wait, this is a conference for composters, and they're the guys that are driving the trucks and turning the dirt, the piles, and all that. And they have all these sessions on like how to make better compost, where to sell your compost, where to get the equipment, the heavy machinery equipment. And they have a trade show with Caterpillar stuff, and there are all these guys that are in the waste. And we were there. Why? Because again, I think that it's this holistic solution, and you really need to understand, what do they need to be successful? The whole thing about contamination or the balance between, this isn't just a hole we're throwing stuff, that they need a balance between carbon and nitrogen. and what are their goals? What are they trying to achieve? What do they think about packaging? And so I think early on, one of the things I realized what I was trying to build was a solution that encompassed a wider scope than packaging had traditionally encompassed. So it wasn't, honestly, I wish I could say, oh, I'm this community guy, but it wasn't so much that. It was more of, I'd say, a problem solving approach that encompasses a wide range of stakeholders. Now, of course, in doing that, you're building relationships with all these different folks. And that's where I come back to say sustainable is a team sport, because at the end of the day, what you need to find in every one of those industries are people that are open to sharing, open to solving problems, sharing your mission. And that's also why I say I can't take credit for some of our solutions, because way back on the front end of the supply chain with the films and the resins, the chemists, the scientists, all these people in these companies that are developing these amazing raw materials, I absolutely rely on them in collaboration to help me understand how to produce a solution. So it really ranges from the raw materials all the way to the end. And that's why Munir, for example, good friend, brilliant man, and we're always picking each other's brains. He's the same kind of guy. He's like, yep, sustainable. He's a team sport. And I think we collectively know another good friend of mine, Susan Toman, who runs Compost Manufacturer
Who was
Association.
also on the show recently.
These are people that understand that the way that we're going to move this whole ball forward is to acknowledge that we don't know everything, and acknowledge that we need to span a whole range of solutions that have to work collaboratively. And so that is the community that we've been developing.
Superb. Love it. Okay. £1 billion. How will you get there?
one step at a time. Um, I was just talking to someone about that, and we want to start. Well, there's two things. Obviously, we want to start creating more awareness, and that's a big thing. And the more people that know uh, a, a bunch of things, like one, that there's a solution out there. Two, guess what? Because it's sustainable and compostable, that's not a dirty word. Doesn't mean it can't perform. And number three, we absolutely need to have a circular system. If we create the same system that plastic created, which is a failed system of we're having a recyclable bottle and it doesn't get recycled, composting will have the same challenge. It's compostable, but doesn't get composted. And as I say, this is my saying, I say, nobody wants a recyclable bottle and nobody wants a compostable bottle. They want a bottle that gets recycled. They want a bottle that gets composted, or packaging, for that matter. And I think that's like, I don't want to do a bowl. I want to do the ed. Like, it's not possible. It's done. And that, unless we build our systems and design our systems so that packaging is getting composted, we have a failed, broken system, just like we have now with this plastic recycling situation. So I think that's the challenge, because all those that whole the supply chain's just expanded now to include end of life, and like I said, I think the industry. We'll see if the industry can figure it out or if a new industry emerges. But I think that's the true. It's a completely different problem set. It looks similar to the previous problem set, but by adding that dimension, it really changes, even on the front end, how you design your product. And you know, yeah, I think, yeah, in general, I think that's the big challenge that we have, is figuring out how to re-engineer our thinking to be circular.
And when will you or do you want to get there?
As
And
fast as we can.
elevate with
And
billion pounds.
yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is, I've been doing this for 25 years, and almost every year I hear people complaining about how we're not making progress, and look at this. Why can't we do this? People aren't complying. We can't get the government to change. And I agree. I mean, I wish and hope we could get there faster. But this is a change management problem. It's really like, how do you move human will? How do you move education? How do you move governments? How do you move policy? And this is a very complex system because it's not just switching from plastic bags to compostable bags. It's a whole, not only, like I said, a systemic change, but I fundamentally believe the way we think about packaging and waste is no longer relevant. And we're stumbling, I believe we're stumbling through this because it's a multi-dimensional problem. It's not this one thing of just make it compostable like it was for recycled plastic. That's kind of what it was like. Great, we have plastic. Oh, make recycled plastic. It's really just a material change. But when you get to circular compostable packaging, it's a multi-dimensional problem, which not only encompasses a whole range of other things, but and other stakeholders. But I think it might force them to no longer exist in the way that they've existed, or to re-engineer a whole new solution, the way the internet has forever changed retail, for example, you know, but or the car forever changing transportation. That's a hard thing to transition. I mean, how long it take for the car to get all the gas stations and the rules of the law and the highways. That's taken quite a long time. Now we're racing against the clock, with sustainability. So for me, when are we going to get there? Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I really think it really depends on the fastest way to get there. I believe is through legislation. The foolish way to get there is through quick legislation. And I kind of joke because I think there have been a lot of laws put in place. And I'm not going to point fingers, but there's been some laws put in place in the country that are really lopsided. I think they're not gonna. I think they're gonna. They've taken us backwards in some ways. I think they're gonna wind up falling apart like a house of cards. But that also is part of the learning process, right? One step back, two steps forward. Sometimes you have to take a step back, but that's also the collective learning process. I think that's our big challenge, is we don't have that alignment, and I think the model that's going to help us get there is a new and disruptive model that hasn't yet emerged. And um, yeah, and I also wanted to say something else. People always say, "Oh, we're not making progress," but like I said, I always like to go back to 2008 when someone said that's combustible, and that word wasn't even in our vocabulary. And we have actually made, it doesn't feel like it, but we have made a lot of progress. Certainly not as fast as a lot of us want, but it's a complicated problem, and we're having this dialogue. I mean, there was no one for me to talk to in 2000. you know, I don't think anyone would want to talk about compostable packaging or circular packaging back then.
Yeah, I was definitely not ready for you in 2000. So I'm glad I made it in
but
2025.
but but it's we're moving. We really are moving forward. And when we're going to get there, I don't know. Not fast enough for me, but yeah.
I, well, I hope sooner than later, and I don't know what's going to happen with the current thinking of drill baby drill. So how does that impact the
Yeah.
thinking of the bigger companies who had commitments towards sustainability? But I guess we live and learn. It's still early days, and that all good things have to come towards closure. And of course, I know you were going to say something, so please do.
Oh.
And then, of course, the last question is, what does good garbage mean to you?
Yeah, I have an answer. I was like, before I give this answer, I should go back and listen to what everyone else said, because I think the answer I'm going to give you is the obvious answer that everyone would say. And if it is, I apologize. I can give you a better answer. To me, good garbage is no garbage. I mean, it's like it comes back to that human existence. We just us existing is not sustainable, right? We're consuming and we're using and we're disposing. And there was like I said, there was a time when I on a different podcast, I think it was on 2004. I said, back to the March of Dimes kind of thing. My dream would be for us to go out of business. I don't think it's going to happen. I would be so happy if someone said, you know what, we just don't need any of it. In fact, in the early days, I would tell people, like, do you really need those two layers of pack? Why don't you just have this one? So as much as it looks like I'm running a business, we are really mission based, and our dream would be to create no garbage and to create no waste, and that's the goal we're always striving for. I doubt we'll get to that, but we're always trying to eliminate garbage. Yeah, I don't see why we'd want any of it, frankly.
You'll be surprised, Rich, with the range of answers to that question. So I do plead you to go and listen to some of these, but you'll be surprised, and it's just beautiful because people have different thinking, and that's what makes us human and a
Right.
community in some ways, in many ways, and then people just have different definitions, and it's really interesting to hear that and expand our minds. That oh yeah, this is also important. But thank you, Rich, for taking the time. This has been such an illuminating conversation in so many ways. And I think more than anything else, what I see is this purity of heart and soul to do something which is so impactful. So thank you for your work and for
Thank
your
you.
time today.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak with you, and I really enjoyed it. I hope we get a chance to talk again soon, Ved.
I'm sure we will.